Understanding the Anthropocene requires systems thinking. Since most of us exist at the interface of land, sea, and sky, exploring our world calls for knowledge about how the component parts of Earth systems and human development systems interact to form an emergent reality, one in which the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. But how do we begin to think systematically? Is this a cloud system, a forest ecosystem, a climate system? Answer: it's all three. More precisely, it's a complex system of systems. In fact, you are a complex system of systems. Functionally, the human body has a circulatory system and a nervous system. It also has a digestive system and an immune system for health, along with literally hundreds of other systems and subsystems that define the biological human being. But it's not just biology. Humans have the capacity to create and manipulate systems of management and technology, such as computer systems, that can be used to design, build, and manage other systems, ranging from modern megacities to the sewage and wastewater treatment systems that make those cities livable. More than 4 billion people now live in urban areas. For their jobs, commerce, and security, they depend on regional transportation systems, including ground transportation systems that in turn depend on a system of bridges and tunnels to move people and goods across obstacles, such as rivers. The rivers form a vital part of yet another system, the hydrological system, which makes life on Earth possible in the first place. These rivers eventually connect us to the ocean, but along the way, they may lead us to yet another vital system, the energy system. People living in the Anthropocene require growing supplies of affordable energy, often at great cost to environmental health. But they may also benefit from the Anthropocene's renewable energy revolution, which provides eco-friendly alternatives such as solar power and wind energy. Only one other system matters as much to people as water and energy: food production. Industrial food systems have become dominant throughout the world. Food systems, together with water and energy, provide the core of humanity's collective life support system. In fact, water, food, and energy can be thought of as the life support system of systems for the entire planet. The sustainability of this system of systems will determine the fate of the Anthropocene, and perhaps the fate of life itself. In this episode, we will examine the ultimate life support system, one that we humans depend on along with an estimated 8.7 million other species. We should begin by defining our terms. A system is an interacting set of components that are needed to produce a synergistic outcome, a whole that is greater than the sum of its parts. A system of systems is a collection of two or more independent systems that combine to create an even more complex and powerful system, one that is greater than the sum of its component systems. The fundamental ideas behind this concept are integration and synergy. By integrating two hydrogen atoms and an oxygen atom, we produce the single most important synergy known to science: water. There are several other critical concepts needed to understand systems behavior: feedback, synthesis, and emergent properties. All systems depend on feedback loops that either provide self-correcting negative feedback, think balance, or self-reinforcing positive feedback, think avalanche. Negative feedback helps us remain on a chosen path. Positive feedback reinforces or amplifies our movements away from a chosen destination, leading to runaway conditions. Sometimes it will pull or push us in tightening circles. Actions have consequences which lead to further actions that, depending on feedback loops, shape our future through stabilizing or destabilizing causal behaviors. Consider how you drive a car. Negative feedback is constantly telling you to adjust your steering wheel both left and right, to stay in the middle of your lane. If you use positive feedback, like this man driving under the influence of alcohol, you may soon be off the road entirely. Generally speaking, negative feedback prevents systems from crashing, while positive feedback is a self-amplifying process, sometimes likened to the behavior of an addict. Positive feedback is the elixir of more. It is a major driver of exponential growth in human population, consumption, and conflict. A good example of dangerous positive feedback is a planet experiencing runaway growth in greenhouse gases. A warming ocean releases more water vapor, which is itself a powerful greenhouse gas, hence amplifying ocean warming and releasing more water vapor in a vicious cycle. Although we are socialized from early childhood on to accent the positive and avoid the negative, in systems terms, favoring positive feedback loops is likely to end in disaster. The second term, synthesis, refers to the combination of parts or ideas needed to form a system. The key insight here is that understanding complex systems requires both analysis and synthesis. Breaking complex systems down to component parts is the goal of analysis, while combining parts systematically into a coherent, holistic understanding of the system is the goal of synthesis. Analysts focused on trees, while synthesists envision forest. Finally, emergent properties are structures and functions that are revealed only as parts come together in organized fashion to produce new properties that are not found in the parts themselves, only in their synergistic assembly. That is how a tiny acorn becomes a giant oak tree, and is how you emerged from a synergy of cells, their nuclei, chromosomes, and DNA, all of which combine to form organs and eventually a thinking, feeling human being. In fact, every living being can be considered a system of systems with emergent properties. The rise of systems thinking is in large part a response to the growing complexity of human relationships and advances in technology. Managing nearly 8 billion people, many of them engaged in global commerce and communication, is not a simple extension of the complexity challenge facing small bands of hunter-gatherer ancestors. Their choices were far fewer and relatively uncomplicated. Ours are wildly multidimensional, rapidly changing, contingent on thousands of other actions and decisions, and mired in challenges of global governance. Moreover, our responses to these challenges tend to be narrowly focused due to an educational system that encourages increasing micro-specialization as students advance. Higher education in particular promotes positive feedback loops of specialization as an aid to knowledge building and advancing the division of labor required of complex societies. Unfortunately, this narrowing usually comes at the expense of critical interdisciplinary learning about adaptive systems and their interacting synergies. Systems thinking arises from the need to understand vast scales of interconnectedness and interactivity. We do this not because of curiosity alone, but in many cases because our welfare and even our survival depend on it. A society with so many forms of interaction and contingency is one where prediction is difficult and planning is essential. Systems thinking is a way to improve our understanding of complex adaptive systems, thereby making prediction, planning, and decision-making more reliable and more responsive to sudden changes in the social and natural environment. All of this requires a good capacity for analysis, but it depends even more on synthesis, the ability to bring together disparate facts, ideas, and methods of research that help us discover how things are connected and why. Interacting systems are becoming increasingly complex, interdependent, and vulnerable to cascading failures in one system that have unforeseen effects on other systems. Tightly coupled systems such as the electric power grid are especially vulnerable to such failures. Even loosely coupled systems, such as the web services that drive the internet, are vulnerable to large-scale disruption. Consider, for example, the rise of cybercrime, or online interference in elections, or the grotesque distortion of truth often peddled on the internet. Or think about the impacts of climate-fueled storms, wildfires, droughts, and sea level rise on society's infrastructures for energy, water distribution, transportation, and land use. The growing vulnerability of today's ecosystems, infrastructures, internet services, and democratic institutions will test humanity's ability to sustain our current consumption patterns and lifestyles. This may be the greatest test we face in the Anthropocene. While many of us have seen what cascading system failures look like during a blackout in the power grid, few of us have experienced firsthand what a major disruption in food and water systems would do to our security, health, and morale. The invention of new and improved technologies to reduce the severity and frequency of cascading disruptions has reassured most people that the human brain remains our ultimate resource and safety system. But the brain has serious limitations of processing and interpretation, especially in this era of dizzying change. So does the prospect of supplementing or replacing it with artificial intelligence. Although advanced robotics will help us cope with rapid change, human control of the technology is largely based on the dubious assumption that we will still design, make, and direct the machines, not some smart robot we have endowed with artificial intelligence. Like it or not, the logical end of the Anthropocene may well be to usher in a new era of artificial intelligence and machine learning, what some call the Machinocene. Whether led by humans or AI robots, the need to prevent cascading failures will intensify in coming years. The chain reaction of risk to ecological health and to financial wealth is intimately tied to accelerating global interdependence and to the growth imperative that in many ways powers the Anthropocene. The growth imperative is an example of positive feedback operating simultaneously as creator and destroyer of wealth. Flash crashes of financial institutions and of ecosystems constitute fast-changing risks that the Anthropocene imposes in exchange for a staggering amount of goods and services made possible by global markets and socially unconstrained technological development. No one can be confident that the rewards will outweigh the risks, and everyone should recognize that the rewards may be only temporary, while the potential damage to ecosystems and to long-term creation of wealth may be irreversible. So what does systems thinking reveal about the Anthropocene and our place in it? First, it tells us that the Earth is an integrated system of systems in which one species, ours, is fast becoming a global force of nature. Driving that anthropogenic force is a positive feedback loop based on capitalism's perpetual search for profit. Profit that can be reinvested to produce even greater profit. Reinforcing this feedback loop is humanity's application of the scientific method and associated spin-offs in technology, along with an annual $5 trillion global subsidy for fossil fuel use. All of this feeds a consumer culture that is constantly expanding as a result of population growth, marketing, and the psychological manipulation of individual human wants and needs. The narrative we tell ourselves about this convergence of profit, science, energy, and consumerism is that human progress is inevitable, and the resulting displacement of other species and ecosystems is part of the price required for our well-being. But this dubious form of progress risks sharp reversal by the unintended consequences of burning fossil fuels and by the political tensions that flow from concentrating wealth in so few hands. It raises troubling questions about lifestyles that depend on rapid material growth, and it threatens to replace Judeo-Christian notions of planetary stewardship with a new and unflattering picture of humanity as a cancer on the earth, unable to harness positive feedback in reaching a new state of enlightenment, one based on resilience and sustainability. Fortunately, the cancer cell analogy is not inevitable. We can just as easily imagine humanity using the concept of the Anthropocene as a mirror for reinventing how we see ourselves. In rejecting the image of planetary domination that we see in the mirror, Some of us may be ready to adopt a new identity as creators of sustainable communities, with their emergent properties of resilience, increased equity, greater empathy, reliance on renewable energy, and experimentation with decentralized forms of interdependence and governance. Sustainable communities depend less on globally designed markets and central political authority, and more on local self-reliance, voluntary simplicity, and local forms of environmental awareness. Achieving a future of this type would call for a repurposing of the Anthropocene from an end to a means for hastening its own demise. But is that even possible? Navigating the future is very much like rafting down a turbulent river with branching tributaries, each one leading to ever more uncharted streams. The branches we take are chosen partly by us and partly by the currents and winds that carry us along the nomadic adventures of life. During the journey, we have an opportunity to experience moments of exquisite beauty and poignant reflection, moments generated by the awe-inspiring natural systems that add grandeur to our adventures. Encounters with these systems reveal the enormous scale of nature and the relative insignificance of individual human lives. They alert us to the beauty and serenity that helps fuel human happiness, and to the magnificent landscapes and seascapes that quietly inform our sense of place. The scenic values we admire, especially where wild lands meet blue water, stimulate our sense of wonder. But they can also serve to remind us of how small and exposed we are to nature's vast powers of life and death. Encounters with wildness often heighten our sense of vulnerability, but they can also enchant us with the mystery and unpredictability of life in the wild. Such encounters involve systems that are not designed or built by us. They are not products of human thought. The beauty they generate cannot be appropriated by humans. It can only be captured as virtual images in film, art, and literature. And while the images can be preserved, the system dynamics they artificially capture cannot be reliably reproduced by humans. systems are always changing. So is their appearance. A stunning sunset is fated to fade and die, like all of us who behold its ephemeral colors. In fact, most of the exquisite beauty created by Earth's systems is fleeting, much of it hastened by a relentless wave of human development. Our efforts to manipulate natural systems and promote planetary engineering are at best clumsy attempts to simplify those systems, usually at our peril. Playing God will always be a sign of human conceit, and yet we may have boxed ourselves into a corner on this question of human intervention. Modifying natural systems is becoming necessary in order to undo accumulating damage from our past actions or selfish neglect. But the greatest challenge will be modifying human behavior and expectations. If we wish to preserve the wonder and awe of a world system of systems, we will need to learn both intellectually and emotionally how to manage our species' quest for domination, and how to stop ignoring our deeply shared need for aesthetic fulfillment in our relationship with nature.
All of this can be legitimately viewed as products of systems thinking, although the aesthetic and wonder-filled parts will be dismissed by some as being unscientific. Systems thinking for many professionals is merely a technical method of integrated analysis. But this can result in sterile kinds of inquiry that miss the essence of what natural systems contribute aesthetically to human quality of life. The dispassionate language of systems used by many scientists and engineers may actually inhibit important kinds of insight and discovery. Such revelations arise in the feelings of wonder and awe that emerge from encounters with non-human nature. These feelings, while steeped in emotion, are nevertheless essential for human development. Perhaps the true essence of systems thinking can be distilled as the beauty that healthy systems generate and the sorrow that they leave behind when no longer vital or viable. We have only to examine the human life cycle to see why this might be so.